Honest J. Nowak, coming at you live. All right. A pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to HJN Graphix. Today, let's get going with some more stuff relating to gaming, and more importantly, let's get on going with something that's a little more under the water. I'm specifically talking about Subnautica. Now, I do know that it's a duology, and I do know as well that I actually was able to play both of these games throughout this year, so you know what? I'll just go ahead and talk about both of them, starting with the first one from 2014. Subnautica itself is basically a whole different game when it comes to underwater exploration, and it is in fact one of the most popular by this point. But for a game made in 2014, released in 2014, and given a lot of reception, and has also given a lot of amazing creators out there to play the game itself, possibly get jump scared a few times from certain creatures that dwell within the ocean itself of this fictional world that it's in, I will say that being that I've actually played Subnautica entirely, it really does give me a nice unique feeling of all sorts of things. But the way I see it, Subnautica is a bit more than just your typical sort of underwater exploration. It is in fact the combination of a lot of unique trademark things out there that many PlayStation 4 fans like myself do know. It contains underwater exploration, obviously, but it also has itself an open world capability, even though there's not really a visible map around there for some odd reason. But it also contains survival, some horror, some action, and a variety of other things out there. It mostly has to do with adventure. The opening cutscene of this game basically dictates a diver, whom originally was inside a large spaceship, a station by the name of Aurora. But unfortunately, it crash lands on a certain desolate planet with little more than a bunch of water all over it. And upon crashing down, this diver ends up inside of an escape pod that eventually lands inside the water and also gives us a good view of the entire gigantic fiery wreckage of the Aurora itself. This diver, unfortunately, doesn't have a whole lot to do except to repair the many parts of the escape pod itself, including its communication system, but also to basically fight for survival in any possible way that can ever be done, including having to hunt down certain fish as a way to get both food and water into the system. And not to mention oxygen, because it is a huge planet covered in water, because, well, that's just how the game is. But the thing is, it's a bit more than just a simple fight for survival. As I found out myself, this game actually does, in fact, have plenty to offer, in a way. Because first of all, you basically start off with a few different things, including a medkit sort of system that basically gives you a medkit every now and then, as well as a few storage vessels within the pod itself. And upon exiting the pod, you basically start off with a few standard pieces of equipment, including fins, a standard oxygen tank, and a variety of other things that any normal diver would actually come prepared with. But along the way, you do get to discover certain parts of the Aurora itself and a variety of other things, including blueprints and artifacts that you can utilize as a way to gather additional blueprints, which in turn can allow you to craft new items. Every now and then, you'll come across certain things out there relating to the Aurora vessel entirely, and upon discovering certain parts of the Aurora vessel itself, you can in fact use certain items to fetch different materials, to gather different components, and find other sorts of items that you can also get by exploring around the world entirely. There are in fact a lot of pieces of tech that will be able to help you, including portable storage lockers, a large inflatable raft, which will allow you to get to the surface a lot quicker than by simply swimming upwards. Then of course you have upgraded versions of your standard scuba gear, including large oxygen tanks, sometimes even bigger oxygen tanks, enhanced flippers, a radiation outfit to help you protect against radioactive materials of all sorts, a rebreather which will allow you to dive even further, and a variety of different weapons and other items that you can carry in your hands, like a scanner, a flashlight, a mineral detector, and a simple knife, which can be used to fetch certain materials out there, including coral and creep vines, pretty much. But above all that, I will at least go too far to say, for a 2014 title at least, it really does what it does best, being a PS4 game. The combination of open world, survival, horror, exploration, and detailed storylining. It's interesting to note, though, that there actually was a sequel. Yeah, Subnautica Below Zero. So, when you really think about it, the intense popularity of the game itself, the first one, so to speak, seemed to be a bit more than just a bit far-fetched to some people. But the way I see it, especially with a lot of gameplays and a lot of walkthroughs I've seen online, that just meant that the game itself had gotten a lot of money. It had gotten a lot of good reviews. It had gotten a lot of good feedback, reception, and otherwise. But I will say, though, that with Below Zero, it's a bit of a different story. It is pretty much the same exact thing. You end up crash landing at somewhere, and then you end up going into some sort of ocean planet. But this one is in fact different. This planet pretty much has polar ice caps around it. Ergo, that's what the title Below Zero pretty much comes in for. But above all that, it does seem this game actually is giving us a bit of a different perspective on the entire eulogy of underwater exploration. But the many studies that have gone around relating to this are certainly intriguing. Subnautica Below Zero is certainly different when it comes to all the different mechanics and spectrums that are basically first gathered on what the original had basically shown us. It is certainly the same sort of thing, pretty much put into perspective, but Bandai Namco, the same company that had given us Jump Force 2019 and Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, in comparison to those, pretty much, I will say that Subnautica Below Zero is actually a decent title, but not necessarily quite as good, or as remarkable, or as memorable as the first one, pretty much. And that's a lot of as's. Yeah, I did not say the A word, so shut it. But I will certainly say, though, that this actually is a bit different. Not just for the fact that it looks the way, but it feels the way. Because when playing both of these games, I sure do understand the fact that both of them have their own unique merits. They have their own ways of mechanics and moving around, and their own storyboards, their own creativity, and they can be different in both ways, just like with sequels relating to movies and video games otherwise. But I'm pretty much seeing Subnautica Below Zero being a bit different, because here in this story, instead of some random unnamed diver, you have someone by the name of Robin. And this person by the name of Robin ends up going down onto this sort of planet with polar ice caps and a bunch of water all around it to help find a lot of secrets and the like relating to a lost friend. And the whole thing about this, though, is that compared to the story from the first game, where it's basically just an unnamed diver who crash lands on the Earth, then tries to find a way out, but then eventually comes across some sort of ancient alien tech on that same old planet, but basically does have to go through a lot of different things just to be able to even escape the planet alive. This one actually is a bit more detailed, a bit more precise, and a bit more clear in a way, when contextually defining the story overall, pretty much. So I will say at least that's a bit of a step up from what we received from the other game, but otherwise it does seem that Below Zero still does have some tendencies here and there, because the storyline goes to a certain point where it can pretty much become a little confusing. It also is worthy to note that it almost seems cryptic in a way. You'd have to look up a lot of walkthroughs just to be able to find certain areas, to be able to get through certain paths, because there are tons of rather secretive areas that are almost obscured. Your general field of vision would not be able to detect them easily. your field of vision is not necessarily very limited to a lot of things, but in this game, you don't necessarily have everything it takes to find these areas on your own, pretty much. It pretty much just brings us back to the 80s and 90s, especially on Nintendo consoles, where games get so cryptic to a point where it's frustrating as crap. But here in this game, I'd say the cryptics, they probably are not necessarily well done in a way, because eventually I could figure this stuff out for myself, but at what cost? My time, pretty much? Yeah, that would probably be a good thing out there. That's typically why some clips that I would actually have when recording the game footage for this does not necessarily seem to be as long, because there are a bunch of moments where I get stuck. Very stuck. To the point where I have to look up walkthroughs on YouTube or otherwise to find out where the crap am I supposed to go next. But of course, just like with the first game, this one was also something where I didn't have to go too far, ultimately. I basically have a lot of footage for Gaming with Kaiju Force Neo Mainline Season 11, pretty much. And that's pretty much it. Otherwise, I'm not really looking at a bunch of things out there that seem wrong with this game entirely. Overall, though, in comparison to the first one, it's probably not as good as the first one, in the same way a lot of people might think that a lot of sequels, number 2s, seem to be, well, not so well done as number 1s. In comparison, pretty much. But I will say, in its own right, Subnautica Below Zero is quite different, has a lot of new feels to it and a lot of new sights to behold, but otherwise I'm not necessarily seeing a ton come out of this game, when in contrast to the first one, you could basically get crap tons off of it. So at least Bandai Namco does not quit their day job on this stuff. But otherwise, that's pretty much it for today. And if you want to see more, go down to my channel, then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.